This is Support is Sexy, episode 111, and today we're going to talk about difficult conversations. Welcome to the Support is Sexy podcast. I'm your host, Elayne Fluker, entrepreneur, author, producer, and founder of Chic Rebellion Media. 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, I talk to women entrepreneurs who share their journeys and the true stories of their wins and their lessons, and give you insight and inspiration to take your business and your life to the next level. Here we go. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here for another episode of Support is Sexy. I'm Elayne, and I'm so happy to have you here because you know it just would not be the same without you. And today it is Monday, December 5th, if you're listening to this in real time, the start of a new week for most of us. And I wanted to talk to you today about something that I actually don't think I've mentioned on the show before, but as most of you know, I relocated from New York to Atlanta, or if you don't know, I recently relocated from New York to Atlanta to be closer to family. And one of the many reasons, it's been great, but one of the many reasons is because I have a family member here who has early Alzheimer's. And if you don't know what Alzheimer's is, I'll put a link in the show notes so you can find out more about the disease. But it's really it's not a painful disease physically, but it's painful for the person and the people around that person because it seriously affects the person's memory, particularly, or at least in my family member's case, the short-term memory. So there's that. So that's part of the reason to be here, to help support my parents and my family with that part of this person's journey. So what I thought about recently is this idea of the need to have difficult conversations with people, whether it's people you love or, in the case of here, what I wanted to talk about here, people in business or just people in your life in general. And I thought about this because we recently had to have a difficult conversation with this family member that I was talking about, which I'll tell you about, but also because of it's the end of the year, or going toward the end of the year, being December 5th, as I mentioned. And what I don't want for you is for you to take anything that feels like weight or heaviness or something that you need closure on, or something that's been hanging over you. And usually for most of us, that's because we didn't tie up or have some difficult conversation with someone, or tie up something that's just been dragging along that we know we need to let go of, and we drag it into the new year and then make promises to ourselves to fix it next year. Take this opportunity this month, within the next few weeks, to tie up loose ends, to have the conversations you need to have. And maybe those conversations aren't difficult, quote unquote difficult. We don't have to label them that. But I thought of them as difficult conversations because sometimes they're hard for us to have, or they're difficult for us to broach the topic with the person because of the sensitivity or whatever the reason. But my thing is to encourage you to face those things that are weighing you down this year, or those things that you need to tie up this year, so you don't carry them into next year. So this idea of having difficult conversations, it's actually something that came up in some form in this workshop that I've also mentioned many times here on the podcast, called Momentum, that I was in last year, 2015, which was fabulous, changed my life. But one of the parts of that journey within that workshop is this idea of sort of having conversations with people. There's a lot to it, so I won't go all deep into it, but this idea of confronting people, having a conversation about whatever's bothering you. More importantly, it's about letting go, saying it, releasing it, having the other person accept it or not, and letting it go. So wanted to talk today on this episode of the podcast about difficult conversations and give you some tips, not based on Momentum. That's a whole different experience. I suggest you sign up. I'll have links to that too, but not from Momentum, from my own experience in general and this past week in having this conversation with a family member about the topic. And the topic in this case was, what are we going to do as far as your living arrangements to this person? Because they can still make decisions and they have their mind in that way. And you want to be respectful and allow them the ability or the space to make a decision instead of just shoving the person somewhere, as some people might do, into a home or something like that. This was a situation where, hey, this is where we are. This is how the disease is progressing. We have to do something. Let's have a conversation. So for you all, some things to think about as you think about broaching a topic with someone that might be sensitive or having a conversation. And look, this could apply to something at work too. If you have a 9-to-5 job and you want to talk to someone, a coworker or something that you may think there's some problem with, or you may sense something, or you want to avoid a problem, this could apply to you in that place too. So the first thing I would say is start from a place of love within yourself and a mutual respect for that person. And I say this not because you have to be obviously lovey-dovey, doesn't have to be a romantic relationship, but if you start before you even get to the person, get to the conversation from yourself, from a space of love, take some quiet time and think, okay, I'm not going at this like I'm going to battle. In other words, I'm going at this from a place of love, because the thing is about resolution, which is healing for both you and the other person and the other people. So start from a place of love and start from a place of respect, even if the other person hasn't been loving or respectful to you, which is where the difficult thing comes in, right? If the person hasn't been loving and respectful to you, you still try to come from that place if this is someone that you still want to approach. Now, if they've been disrespectful in a way that has been harmful or physical, obviously I'm not telling you to go talk to that person. There might be other routes you need to take as far as getting some support around that. But I'm talking about someone that you do want to talk to, have a conversation with, still come from a place of love and respect on your end. And what I think this does is it takes the stem out of the bomb that could potentially be a big argument. Now, things might still escalate because there's emotions sometimes involved in these conversations. But I think, at least for me, and in this incident just recently, starting from a place of, this is why we're having this conversation. We're starting from a place of love. This is what we want to do, why we're doing it and talking about it. You know, really laying it out in a way that makes the other person feel honored during the conversation, even if it's a tough subject to talk about. Another thing is ask if now is a good time for the conversation. I mean, you know, with some of us, I know when things are on our mind, we can't wait. We need to talk about it right then. But you might be dealing with someone who needs a little bit of time before they talk about it. Or it might be a case where, okay, now you've waited 2 weeks. The other person has completely forgotten about it, but you want to talk about it right now. So try to make sure that you're both on the same page as far as the timing, and ask, is now a good time? And look, if the person is trying to put you off and says, no, now is not a good time, ask when is a good time. Make an appointment, make a meeting, whatever it has to be, but find a good time to speak to the person or persons privately, but find a time that works for both of you or all of you. Also, be clear on your what and your why. So in the case of this conversation with the family member, the why was, we're not doing this because we want to push you into some place that you don't feel comfortable. We're doing this because everybody loves you and wants to take care of you, wants to find the best solution to support you. And I have to tell you, in presenting it that way, I could see in this person's face a little bit of relief, because it wasn't, I can only imagine. In fact, I can't even imagine having your independent, someone telling you that they're basically about to figure out a way to, in some ways, take your independence away from you after all these years, your whole life, you've been independent. Now, because of this disease that you cannot control, you're losing that independence to some degree. So I can only imagine what that feels like. So the thing is to say, this is coming from a space of love and care for you. And this is why we're doing it, because we want to take care of you and because we want to make sure you're safe. It relieved a little bit in that conversation. So if you're clear on your why, and when you present it to the person and you're clear about it, it can potentially alleviate some of the stress within the conversation or the situation, because it doesn't leave it open-ended of, well, why are you coming to me with this? Hey, this is my why. This is why I'm saying it. And also, as we said in the first idea, you're coming from a place of love. Another thing, speaking about open-endedness, is have in mind the outcome that you'd like to have. Now, in my personal example, the outcome is to have this family member go live with another family member who has said that would be fine. It would be great because that's someone that she knows and loves, and that would really take care of her. So that would be my ideal outcome. But again, giving this person room to make the decision to say if that's what you want, or do you want to go into an assisted living place. But either way, have an outcome in mind. And you can even present that to the person if it makes sense. This is what I'm thinking, but what are you thinking? So have an idea in mind, but also be open to discussion. If you go into it too rigid, unless it's something where you're putting up some kind of boundary for your own protection, that's different. But if you go into it too rigid, you may leave with the same issue that you came into the conversation with, because there was no flexibility on your part, and which will likely cause no flexibility on the other person's part. Think about the areas where you can be flexible, if possible, where you can negotiate, have your idea in mind, but be open-minded. Another thing is, I would say, if you need a decision one way or the other, again, for me, in this case, it was, do you want to do this, live here, or do you want to live there? Let us know what your decision is. The thing is, agree on a deadline on that decision. If you leave it open-ended, as you probably know, it might go on forever, and we're not trying to bring this into 2017. We want some resolutions this year. So have a sense of when you'd like to have this wrapped up. Give the person a deadline, see if they can agree on that deadline, and then stick to it. Be sure to check back in during that deadline or beforehand to ask that person, what's the final decision? This way you both kind of have a sense of, this is when we're going to wrap this up. And again, it doesn't let it drag on forever. And the last thing I'll say with difficult conversations, leave the conversation as respectfully as possible. So however it ends, because, having a conversation with someone, no matter how much love you bring to it, sometimes it's just not going to end the way you want it to. That's just the difference of opinion with the other person. Those things happen. So if that does, you can still leave the conversation respectfully. And look, if this is a discussion about you leaving a relationship, whether that's a romantic relationship or a business partnership or your job, whatever that is, you're leaving respectfully. But then after you've made the decision and you've had the conversation, let it go. I know in my case, I've had situations where I've had the conversation, I've spoken to the person, we both said our piece. I'm thinking in my mind, okay, I'm leaving this, I'm letting it go. But then it's still in me somewhere, bothering me for some reason. And you know why? Because I haven't really let it go. So if this is something where you're moving on from whatever this discussion is and there is no future deadline or discussion to be had, do your best to let it go so that you don't drag this baggage along with you into the next relationship, the next partnership, the next business, the next job, the next anything. You want to go into things as light as possible. And to do so, I believe you have to have, when necessary, those, we won't call them difficult conversations that lead to a resolution for you and hopefully for the other person. All of this whole episode is really about wanting you to take care of yourself and to stand up for yourself. That's another thing about these conversations. I mean, in the case that I mentioned in my example, it wasn't so much of standing up for ourselves as it was taking care of this other person, but still you have to stand up for yourself and make sure that you're okay. Because if you're not okay, you can't be okay for other people. You can't be okay for your business. If you're not feeling good about yourself, where you are, what you have in your life, and those kinds of things, how can you positively affect change in your business? How can you positively affect change with your health in your life? You have to make sure you're okay. And in doing so, that usually means setting some boundaries with people and projects, having conversations that may not be comfortable, doing the things you need to do so that you can move through this world as light and free as possible. There will be enough problems out there for you to confront in 2017. Don't bring anything with you from 2016 that you don't have to. So hopefully these tips are helpful to you. Please let me know. You can get in touch with me on social media at Elayne Fluker or at Support is Sexy on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. We're all over the place. Please be in touch and let me know what you think. This is one that was obviously a little bit more personal than some of the other ones, even though I try to infuse things that are going on in my life into the podcast when I do these solo episodes. But I did think about that, did want to share that with you all. Hopefully it is helpful. So do let me know. Please be sure to go to supportissexypodcast.com so you can see more information from this episode, a couple of the links that I mentioned, but also you can see interviews with other inspiring women entrepreneurs who are there to give you advice and tips and all the good stuff about their stories, the good and the bad, to help move you forward in your business and in creating something sexy in your life. All right. So as always, I appreciate you guys being here. Truly, truly, truly appreciate you. I love you for it. You're here with me every day, Monday through Friday. Sometimes you're even here on the weekends. So I really appreciate that. Please be sure to get in touch with me. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode. And until next time, you know what to do. Go out there and create something sexy, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care.